Fairy tales are the stories you tell children to put them to sleep, but the original tales weren't always suitable for kids' ears. The fairy tales we all know today are versions of their originals. What we've been told are the happy endings where nothing truly bad happens, but that isn't how the stories were meant to go. The Grimm brothers gave us the original fairy tales, and I'm here to tell you what really happens before the happily ever after. The three main stories I read and compared to their originals are Cinderella, Rapunzel, and Snow White. We all know the basic story of Cinderella: two evil stepsisters and an evil stepmother who doesn't let her go to the ball. Cinderella's fairy godmother shows up and gives her a carriage and a blue dress, but she has to be back by midnight. With leaving the ball, she ends up losing her glass slipper, and the prince uses it to find her. Now that's the nice version. The way the story was intended has a much more gruesome ending. In both stories, Cinderella's mother dies when she is at a young age. However, her father lives in the Grimm version and goes along with making a slave of Cinderella. When the time comes for the stepmother and sisters to go to the ball, they tear Cinderella's dress apart and tell her she can't go. With the original, the stepmother makes Cinderella first pick out lentils out of the fireplace ashes, and when she's not satisfied with that, she throws 2 bowls of peas into the ashes and tells her to pick those out as well. Cinderella presents her with the lentils and peas, and still, the stepmother refuses to let her attend the ball with them. After this, there is usually the well-known fairy godmother that appears and gives Cinderella what she needs for the night of the ball. Within the Grimm version, Cinderella runs to the tree of her mother's grave, and it grants her a dress and slippers for each night of the ball, which goes on for 3 nights. There's also no mention of her midnight curfew in the Grimm version. On her way out of the ball, she does lose her slipper in both tales. However, it doesn't just fall off of her foot. The prince actually ordered Pitch to be put on the palace steps that would trap his mystery maiden, and he would finally be able to figure out who he's been with. In order to get out of it, Cinderella leaves the slipper behind and continues on home. We also learned that her slipper was never made out of glass, but rather silk. When the prince gets the slipper and searches the kingdom for his bride, both versions match up until he gets to the house of Cinderella and her family. Both sisters wanted to trick the prince into marrying them, so one sister cut off part of her heel and the other cut off her big toe to fit into the slipper. While riding away with each sister, the prince turned around and noticed blood dripping from the slipper. Again, both stories align, with Cinderella being the last to try on the slipper, and they live happily ever after. Now for the second story, Rapunzel. In the Disney movie version of this story, Rapunzel is taken from the king and queen by an evil woman as a baby. This is almost the same as a Grimm tale, except that Rapunzel was taken from 2 ordinary people who stole from the witch and traded their firstborn child for some vegetables in her garden. Also in the movie version, Rapunzel's mother ingests a magic flower to keep her alive, which then transfers its powers onto her unborn child. No such thing happens in the original. From then on, both stories align by the woman taking the child and sealing her away in a hidden tower away from everyone. But they differ when someone comes up the tower and meets Rapunzel. In the Disney version, a thief named Flynn Rider climbs up the tower seeking refuge from the royal guard. In doing so, he comes upon Rapunzel, while in the original, a prince is riding in the forest and comes upon the tower where he can hear Rapunzel's sweet singing. He decides to call out to her and climbs up her hair and forms a relationship with her over time. Also differing from the Disney movie, Rapunzel ends up pregnant. She slips up and accidentally tells the witch that her clothes are becoming too tight around her stomach. For this, the witch sends Rapunzel away to a far and destitute land, while she comes up with her own plan for the prince. In both versions, her suitor comes back from the tower and climbs up her hair in order to see her. In Disney, Flynn climbs up her hair and is met with Rapunzel chained up by the evil woman, and she stabs him so he can never find Rapunzel again. Rapunzel crawls near him, and with this chance, he cuts off her magical hair. The evil woman tries to cover her face and body, and in doing so, falls out of the window, turning into dust. In Grimm's version, the prince climbs up what is technically Rapunzel's hair, although when he gets into the tower, he learns that it's no longer attached to her. The witch cut off Rapunzel's hair as punishment and tries to overthrow the prince. In escaping, the prince falls out of the tower's window and lands in a bush of thorns, piercing his eyes and blinding him. He wanders around until one day he comes upon the land where Rapunzel was sent all that time ago. They reunite along with their twin children, and while the tears of joy are being shed, some land on the prince's eyes, curing his blindness. This also happens in a way to Flynn Rider. As he's dying, Rapunzel cries onto his wound, and her tears heal him. From then on, both stories have the happy couple living in their kingdom. The last story I will be talking about is Snow White. Snow White has woodland creatures that help her in the Disney version. This never happens in the original. While both stories contain an evil queen that wants to be the fairest of them all, they also both have a huntsman that go after Snow White and try to kill her. In the Grimm version, the huntsman lets Snow White go and kills a wild boar to bring back the lungs and liver the queen requested from Snow's dead body. She then proceeds to have the cook prepare them for her dinner. The queen in both tales ends up poisoning Snow White with an apple. However, in the Grimm version, the queen tries to kill Snow White 3 times total. Once with a lace, twice with a comb, and third with an apple. Each time, Snow White is told not to open the door for anyone, and each time she disobeyed. The queen had disguised herself to look like an old, trustworthy woman. The first time she went with the strip of lace and wrapped it around Snow White to show her how flattering it looked. While doing this, the queen tightened the lace so tight that Snow passed out. The dwarves came in and cut her out of it and told her not to open the door for anyone. Of course, Snow didn't listen when the queen came back in a different disguise and offered her some gorgeous combs. Snow went outside and let the old woman comb her hair, and the queen took this opportunity to put the poisoned comb in Snow's scalp. The dwarves came back and pulled out the comb and warned her not to open the door for anyone. The last time, Snow still didn't listen. The queen came and offered her an apple in her new disguise. This time, Snow was skeptical, and seeing this, the queen took a bite of her side of the apple, which only half of it was poisoned. When Snow saw that the apple was safe for the old woman, she took a bite herself, although hers was from the poison side. This was where the two stories aligned for a bit. The dwarves sealed Snow in a glass coffin, and a prince came along and fell in love with Snow's dead body. In the Grimm version, the prince loves her so much that he takes her in her coffin back to his kingdom. On the way there, one of the prince's guards dropped his end of the coffin, which ended up dislodging the piece of poisoned apple Snow had stuck in her throat. In the Disney version, Snow gets woken up by the prince's kiss. Both versions go on to say that they live happily ever after. So overall, the fairy tales we know about today can be traced back to the Grimm brothers and their original tellings of them. Among these popular fairy tales, there are many more the Grimm brothers have written that are just not passed on. Disney has sweetened and glorified certain fairy tales, which are the ones everybody is familiar with. That's why I chose to compare Cinderella, Rapunzel, and Snow White to their originals. They're ones almost everyone knows. While the Grimm brothers gave us so many good fairy tales, they have been altered over the course of time. Most people don't know the dark origins from which they came from. Remember, all stories have to come from somewhere.